This is Sporting Life.
Well, welcome along to the Sporting Life Racing podcast. David Orr, joined by Graham Cunningham, Ed Chamberlain, Billy Nash and David Johnson. A lot to get through this week, chat's going to start with an article in The Guardian. Greg Wood, one of our best racing writers, wrote on Tuesday that the National Hunt Season half-term report, plenty of grounds for optimism for British racing. An upbeat piece in the main from Greg. Ed Chamberlain, is that how you're feeling at this stage of the Jumps campaign?
Relatively. I think, I don't know what you guys think, I'd probably give the season so far 7 out of 10, something like that.
7.
There have been plenty of disappointments. I mean, that Sunday of the November meeting was very difficult. I think one of my disappointments, those marquee handicaps that people love at this time of year, Paddy Power Gold Cups, Coral Gold Cups, last weekend, December Gold Cup, those fields have been just on the small side, which is pretty alarming for me. But then again, people just love this time of year. This flow of big race Saturdays before Christmas goes down a storm every year. On Friday at Cheltenham on ITV4, we had nearly 600,000 people watching. It was an entertaining Friday afternoon, but no more than that. People just love the jump racing. And I've got no problem with the graded races at this time of year being those quarterfinals and semi-finals that JP McManus referred to. Like it or not, the jump season builds to the most sensational crescendo that so many other sports are jealous of. I think the British team are looking stronger this year, which helps. No reaction from Billy Nash. And the season is bubbling along nicely, I think is the best way to describe it, with lots to look forward to.
You see, Greg made the point that one of the touch points, one of the things that's going to be measured by is the attendance at the Cheltenham Festival, which of course was down last year. Do you think that's fair? Do you think that's how we can judge the health of jumps racing in Britain?
Possibly. I'll come on to that in a minute. But first of all, morning everyone. Hope everyone's doing well. I must admit, the other day I saw a headline, former Sky Sports football presenter gets match of the day job. And I thought, we're moving. Lock, stock and barrel, we've got this. Salute to Catesy, well deserved, but what a letdown when I realised we weren't moving from this podcast to the BBC on massive salaries. But no, to get back to your point, Greg's one of the best we've got.
Sorry, GC. I did say I might be unavailable today. I'm afraid I'm still here.
Greg's one of the best we've got, and his key points were, it was a glass half full piece. Jumping returns to Windsor, 500k in the David Power Cup, Champions full gallop, renewed, supposedly. British favourite for the King George, and Constitution Hill ready for the comeback. A real glass half full piece. And I get it. And I think Christmas, with a good weather forecast, might give us an extra boost. To your point about crowd sizes, etc., I think there's randomness here in terms of crowd sizes. And I came across, and it's tangential this, but found it really interesting. We're going to come to a David Jennings piece in a short while where he said, let's have a look. How can the Melbourne Cup Day grow from 74k to 91k in the space of 2 years? I spoke to various Aussies recently on my travels, and they were all strongly of the opinion that the stringent welfare measures they took around the Melbourne Cup after Anthony van Dijk and Cliffs of Moher, etc., were finally seeping through and giving them a real benefit. Now, I don't think you can measure that accurately, and I don't think crowd sizes are the be-all and end-all, but there is some plenty of reasons to be cheerful over Christmas, and we'll come to one of the key reasons why in the King George before long. But no, hats off to Greg. He's an excellent writer, and that was a glass half full piece. But we have to tip a bit out of the glass with Bill Barber's news story last night that turnover, this is a key stat, betting turnover on British racing has dipped 20% in the last 2 years. So the glass is half full, but no more.
That's a very fair point. Billy, one thing that struck me the other day is how interesting it's suddenly getting in various divisions this season, potentially. The 2 mile chaser, the 2 mile hurdlers, all of a sudden the staying chasers. It's up for grabs in them all, really, isn't it? Which hasn't always been the case come December in recent seasons.
But that's exactly what you want to see at this time of the season, and that's what makes it so interesting. It is. It's it's looking a lot more interesting than even a couple of months ago. You know, we were thinking about if Constitution Hill came back, maybe he'd have a straight march to the champion hurdle again. That's not going to happen. Even if he does come back, it looks a more competitive race. The 2 Mile Chase, the Queen Mother division looks very open. The Gold Cup is open at the moment. So, and obviously the novice events are wide open. So yeah, like you said, it is building up to be a great season. No, unfortunately, being jump racing, a few of those will fall by the wayside between now and Cheltenham, which is inevitable. But at the same time, you know, hopefully we'll find out more about these good horses at Christmas. And yeah, it's you know, onwards and upwards, hopefully, for the jump season. It is building up nicely, I think.
One thing that struck me, there's been talk about restricting how many horses a trainer can run in individual races. I mean, it's all gone quiet on that front. No, but when you look at the horses coming through, the novices, the exciting horses, how few hands are actually in terms of owners? It seems as if there's only 4 or 5 owners now who can get access to the top horses. Clearly, they're spending big, but that lack of diversity where horses are trained, it's matched by the silks that they're wearing as well.
Unfortunately, that's the world we're living in at the moment. I was talking to a friend of mine the other day who was telling me a tale of someone who used to own racehorses in Ireland, tried to get back into racing and just couldn't afford it, because if you want to be competing at the top table now, it costs an awful lot of money. And you know, we see these horses selling for huge prices as stores. They sell for even bigger prices after they win a point to point, or they come from France. And unless you've got deep pockets, you can't afford them. So unfortunately, yes, it is a case of the rich getting richer when it comes to national hunt racing at the moment. Like you said, a lot of these horses are carrying the same colours. There's 5 or 6 very prominent owners, we could all name them, that do have a stranglehold on the sport at the moment. But I think that's just the way we're going. I don't see that changing anytime in the near future.
Oh, David, you're my true barometer for this. Are you looking forward to the spring racing, the Christmas racing, or have you got the date of the Lincoln already ringed in your 2025 calendar?
No, I think you have to be, don't you? And I don't think it's even necessarily about having to be looking forward to Cheltenham. It's just sort of enjoying the stories that we're getting on the way. And I was saying the other week, you know, with regards like Stateman getting beaten on his reappearance, Galopin des Champs as well beaten as well. And not just beaten, but the horses that beat him, they were both horses in the second season straight out of novice company. So they've already had a crack at him, and it sets it up for those next matches along the way. You know, Galopin des Champs rematch against Factor File at Christmas. And obviously, I think Stateman's going to be taken on by Better Days Ahead again. So, yeah, I think it does set it up really well. And, you know, in terms of how we're measuring the success, you know, the likes of the Betfair Chase, that had its biggest field in the last 10 years. The Tingle Creek, that stacked up pretty well. That would have been the biggest field that's had for a long while if they hadn't had the 2 non-runners on the day. So, yeah, I think if you're not looking and picking out the positives, it says as much about your general outlook if you're keeping looking for the negatives rather than focusing on the glass half full, like GC pointed out that Greg had done.
Oh, happy days are here again, aren't we?
We're laughing, but let's bring it down a notch, Ed, with David Jennings. Really interesting piece. At the Racing Post. He was talking about how it can feel like a morgue rather than a race meeting in between races. Doesn't think there's enough done to engage a crowd between the 2 o'clock and the 2:35. You go racing more than any of us, Ed. What say ye?
I say every meeting, everywhere I go is different. There is no set pattern whatsoever. Sometimes, yeah, you want it to rattle on, and we've done our best. You remember in COVID, we trialled 25 and half-hour gaps. It is hard. It is really, really hard to do, to turn things around quickly. The best place probably for it was Goodwood. At the Goodwood Festival during COVID, we had half-hour gaps. It was a right struggle. It really was difficult with all the logistics involved, particularly in this country. And there are other times where you want more time. I'd focus on the big festivals when you do have time. I'd much rather get it right in the paddock, get them in there in order, let the race goers see the horses properly in order, do a proper parade before the race. And when we've got 40 minutes, that's much more possible. And there are times, particularly at a Cheltenham Festival, where you want longer rather than shorter between races. And there is lots to do and lots to see, but other times when there isn't a whole heap. So my answer to that question is a bit on the fence already. Every single week is very, very different. But at those big meetings, my push would be when we do have longer times to make it a much better race goer experience.
People to ask with this GC as well is actual race goers who pay in. And
Yeah.
that's the experience that matters, how they find it.
Yeah, I've read this piece a couple of times. I thought it was stimulating. I tried to get access to it on the train coming down to Ludlow today, and you mentioned the word morgue. So I Googled David Jennings morgue, and I got a funeral directors. And then I Googled David Jennings boring, because that was the other keyword, and I got the piece. And David's saying not enough is being done to cater for our racegoers, the ones who make the effort to get up off their couches. And he thinks it's quite an easy fix. He recommends music between races. I get that completely. That's doable. It doesn't fit for every card, obviously, but for certain ones, especially in the summertime, I think that works nicely. Time between races, Ed's outlined the potential difficulties of bringing that down, especially over jumps. Segregated area where pundits preview races. Not for me, Clive. Other people may think very differently, but it's pretty dry stuff, that by and large, as someone who's been responsible for a lot of it. Big screens for every meeting, that has to be an expense thing. If you're a midweek fixture operating on a budget, that could be a tip you over the edge in terms of expenses. 2 or 3 pony races between actual races, that would entertain some. And playgrounds for kids. There's no magic wand you can wave here, and I do think budget is absolutely key. A lot of people responsible for putting on race meetings would look at that piece and say, chance would be a fine thing. We're already on very tight budgets, and things like bands and big screens, etc., would tip us over the edge financially.
I think Cheltenham at the weekend was a great example of what you can do. And they've got more space, yes, but there was a Santa's Grotto, there were carol singers, bands, masses and masses for the family to do. And that's the key for me, family entertainment. And they do New Year's Day is the biggest growth day of the lot, and they do it beautifully. Newbury likewise. Newbury, Challow Hurdle Day on the 28th. If you want a day out, go there. But there are others that do it much less well, which is why I'm so interested to see the changes on Boxing Day at Kempton.
Can I chip in with one thing? And I've noticed it. I won't name the tracks, but there are a few tracks where it's happened. Your race finishes at that track. There's a good race going off somewhere else soon. It's hard to find it on closed circuit TV sometimes, in the bars and in the grandstands. And I just cannot understand that, because people want to bet not only at the home track but at their away track as well, and they're far less likely to do so if they can't see the bloody race.
I don't agree with that. David, let's talk about budgets. Kia, Amo Racing's Kia, he's closing in on a deal for Freemason Lodge. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and it was first mooted. He now expects it to complete in January. For all the financial headwinds we have in the sport right now, this organisation and their partners are ploughing forward, it seems, with their expansion plans.
Yeah, very much so. And like you said, I don't think it comes as a huge shock. And it's just a case, I think, of further cementing. When you look at, there's been so many short-term decisions that the operation has made and that they've been renowned for in recent seasons, but there clearly is some sort of long-term planning and structure in place, and they're obviously looking to get their own training operation. And I think there's a piece in the paper that I think, reading between the lines, it looks like Rafael Freire will probably be training from there in 2025, but I don't think he's going to have them as a job lot. I think a lot of the trainers that have already been training for him will continue to do so. So yeah, but in terms of when you look at how he's been supporting his own stallions, hasn't he, and buying all these really expensive mares, you do just sort of have slight concerns about how that project is going to go. You've seen the likes of Qatar Racing trying something similar, supporting Cameco, and not having a huge amount of success down the years in recent seasons. So yeah, it does look as though, like I say, that it's not just going to be here for the next 2 or 3 years. They're clearly looking beyond that.
Who are their key trainers going to be, David? Who are their key trainers? Racing going to have a few back in the fold, but that is the key thing. If you've got extremely well-bred horses, they need to be with extremely good trainers, and there are only a handful of those around.
Yeah, I'm presuming that they're going to pretty much stick with who they've got at the moment. So I think George Bowie has quite a few, doesn't he? Yeah, I guess it'll be judged on results, won't it? And you can see why, based on that Rafe Beckett continues to train plenty for them.
It's interesting, their early allocation. I think they've sent 4 to Charlie Johnston, for example, Amo, and one of those is a 1.1 million Frankel from Tatsel's Book 1. So it looks like they're...
Maybe it's not based on results then, I take it back.
I hope you're not listening, Charlie. Good luck for 2025 if you are. DJ, another quick line on Jack Keensoy in The Sun. Living the Dream. It was a fantastic run in the Nunthorpe 2 years ago, but the dream for Adam West at least has died. The horse is leaving Adam, who's now primarily moved to France, still has a yard in Epsom, but Living the Dream won't be there. And there's a battle on between Southern trainers to get their hands on him.
Yeah, well, I was sort of all fired up for this being a disgrace job. How can you take him away from the trainer that's taken him to the top? But yeah, once you read the story, it's not quite as dramatic as that, is it? Like you say, Adam West is moving the bulk of his operation over to France, and the owners have decided that they'd rather keep the horse trained in Britain rather than the UK. So yeah, it's up in the air where he'll end up. But there's a nice vacancy for a Group 1 sprinter at Mick Appleby's stable, isn't there? I think that'd be a really good place for him to go, perhaps. Jack
was saying a number of Northern trainers were trying to snare him at the Gimcrack dinner. I mean, there was very few of them able to speak when I saw them as I left at 11:30. So they must have been very early plays.
I think Steve and Jolene will go south, though, won't they? It's very much a family thing for them.
It seems very much, which makes sense, doesn't it? Billy, the RTE Awards, the BBC Sports Personality of the Year, Wigan Rugby League won yesterday, JC. Great result for the Cherry and Whites. Willie Mullins, Manager of the Year at the RTE Awards. He didn't seem to realise he'd won it, having seen the footage of when they announced it. He stayed firmly in his seat with his back to the stage. He got up eventually. How significant an award is that for him to have won?
I think they're going to have to build a new barn in Closutton just for the awards, not for any more horses, because every day it seems to be a new award coming into Closutton. This is a very significant one, I think. Now, he's not the first trainer to win it. The RTE Manager of the Year, Aidan O'Brien, did win it, I think, in 2017 maybe. But very significant that Willie has managed to win it. It's voted on, I believe, by the RTE Sport staff. So the editorial staff in the sports department, and it was a pretty strong field. He was up against some fairly, recognisable household names, the likes of Damien Duff, Andy Farrell, who of course had guided Ireland to the Grand Slam this year. Big year in GA with a couple of teams that hadn't won All Irelands in a long time. Normally those kind of managers come to the fore, but this year Willie, Aidan also was in the field, by the way, but Willie won it primarily, I think, because he'd landed the Trainers' Championship in Britain, and that hadn't been done in so long, all the way back to Vincent O'Brien in 1957, I think. So on top of all his other achievements, the fact that he won that, I think, tipped him over the edge. Like you said, he seemed completely oblivious to the whole thing, and even when he won it, he was, I thought, very taken aback by the whole thing. But it is great to see National Hunt Racing being recognised in the wider sports community. It can only be good for it, and a well-deserved reward, I thought, for Willie.
I thought it shows the huge difference between the way that racing sits as a sport generally in Ireland compared to Britain. You just could never imagine Martin Pipe or Paul Nicholls more recently ever getting the same sort of accolade for doing it in Britain, could you?
Yeah, it's a good point. And they would talk about one of the key skills of management, good management, is delegation. And we know that Willie does that very well. And we've been interviewed by Kevin Ryan on Monday on Racing TV. Kevin was firing names of horses at him. Dave, you can probably put flesh on these bones. He definitely didn't know some of the horses that were being mentioned. He had no clue. I think he delegates very well to David Casey and Ruby Walsh, who he saluted and said they're pretty much part of the family as well.
Yeah, maybe but key cogs in the wheel. And Billy, let's go on the good news front. Ronan McNally has resurfaced, taking the IHRB to court over his record ban. Listen to his interview on the Nick Luck Daily podcast, available on Tuesdays. And we thought this story had gone away for it, didn't we? But it looks like it's going to come back into the headlines potentially.
You're going to come back. I didn't actually hear his interview with Nick Luck, but yeah, he has decided to take the IHRB to the High Court. I think he's appealing the severity of his sentence more than anything else. He was banned for 12 years for what were described as very serious offences that strike at the integrity and the objective of having a level playing field for all who send horses out to race. Also, deception of the public, and in particular especially the betting public. So he was banned for 12 years. He appealed the 12-year ban. which was upheld, but they did suspend the last 4 years of his sentence. So he's essentially banned for 8 years, which is a fairly draconian sentence. Now, I'm not condoning for a second what he did, but it is a fairly, it's a very, very stiff sentence when you take it in context with some of the other sentences that the IHRB have handed out in recent years. Luke Comer being the obvious one, who was banned. 9 horses tested positive for anabolic steroids, which are banned at all times, and he got a 3-year ban for that. So I think that's kind of, Ronan McNally's ears would have pricked at that and thought, well, if I'm getting banned for 12 years, how does he get away with a 3-year ban for that? And other much smaller bans for doping offences and things like that. So he's going to take him to the High Court. I'd be stunned if he doesn't at least get his ban severely cut. Now, he's still going to get a ban, but I think he will win to some extent this case if it does go the full distance.
Well, let's talk about horses now, Ed Chamberlain. 2 days at Cheltenham last week for you, the Cheltenham Christmas meeting, not the December meeting, the Friday, Saturday. The Friday, arguably the more of interest in terms of quality. Django Bay for Hendo looks an exciting chasing recruit for him.
Oh, very much so, beating Caldwell Potter. I think you make a really good point there, Audie. The fact that Friday was arguably better than Saturday just shows you what a loss the international hurdle is for that Saturday card. Particularly on an ITV show where the December Gold Cup came up as the very first race. It just felt like the meeting slightly dropped off a cliff in terms of interest from then onwards. Had it had the international hurdle at the finale, it would have bookended it perfectly, but it hasn't anymore, so we just get on with it. And it was an interesting couple of days, an enjoyable couple of days, actually. Crowds felt good. There was a lot going on, as we say, lots to do between the races. And that's Novice Chase. He's had a good spell of things, hasn't he? The red and white colours with Hendo. And Django Bay looked very good. I think Caldwell Potter made the headlines with his price tag, but that doesn't do the winner justice. I thought he was excellent. The moment of the day, undoubtedly, Kevin Donoghue on Stumptown, a la Paul Carberry, his hero. At the time, I thought, crikey, does he know that Mr. Coffey is to his left? And maybe he wasn't too concerned with Mr. Coffey being to his left, but I think it was probably the handicap mark he was trying to unsuccessfully protect moving forward. But that was a really good race. And those cross-country chases have really had some interest put into them now, with them all being handicaps building up to the big one in March. People hiding their cards, people playing their cards, and that's going to be a really competitive race in March. So yeah, a good couple of days, but without the international hurdle, it just wasn't as high profile as it used to be.
Tell you how I felt sorry for on Friday. Felt sorry for Kim Bailey and team for Chianti Classico. That horse has worked his way up towards the right towards the top end of British staying chasers, and I think it was a tendon injury he suffered on Friday when going down fighting behind a big improver, King Turgeon, and it looks unlikely we'll see him back on the racecourse just as he was beginning to blossom.
Yeah, really sad. I wasn't just 2 out. It looked like he was going to firmly enter the Gold Cup picture, didn't it? Chianti Classico, which they've been talking about. Billy, just a line on Stumptown. Last week's podcast, you put him up potentially as a Grand National horse for the future. Is he rapidly heading in that direction for you?
What was the Grand National horse? I don't remember. I must listen back to it already.
Yeah, I'm sure you did. I have been drinking, though.
Anyway, yeah, I was quite keen on him this weekend. I did think that was a race that would suit him. And he won well. As Ed said, Keith Donoghue was particularly cool on him. He maintains that he saw the Nicky Henderson horse on his inside. I'm not convinced he did, but either way, he went and won nicely. And it sets him up nicely for that race at Cheltenham in March. And yes, I would imagine going on to the Grand National, then that would be the obvious next step. So he's a horse that just seems to have taken extremely well to that discipline. Keith compared him to Tiger Roll, which is high praise indeed when it comes to cross-country horses, and he has ridden plenty of them. So when he says something like that, I think you should sit up and listen to him.
Jay, it's quite interesting. We look at the time form ratings from the weekend. 146p is what Django Bay got for his win, and 146p also what Majborough got, the Triumph Hurdle winner, who made a really good start to his chasing career at Fairview House on Saturday. It's bubbling away nicely among the novice chasers.
Very much so, yeah. And the 2 mile division is beginning to look really stacked all of a sudden, isn't it? And you had to be impressed with what Majborough did. I suppose the point that we should make is obviously with him being a 4-year-old, he's still getting weight for age at the minute. That by the time the Cheltenham Festival comes round, that will have worked its way out of the system. So he was getting £6, I think, from Tully Hill, wasn't he? So Tully Hill rated 144. even though he was beaten 6.5 lengths because of the weight that he was conceding. But yeah, in terms of what Majborough did, you couldn't fail to be impressed, could you? I mean, you could argue that he had the run of things from the front, but that tends to be the case with these good horses in Ireland. They just obviously keep it simple, go out and show what they can do. So it's going to be a case of where do they step him up in grade next. They obviously got Ballyburn to think about, and Atlantique as well, that was really impressive the week before. So like you say, it's all, you can't win an Arkle at the moment, you can only lose one. So all of these horses, they're keeping their balls in the air at the moment.
It's an amazingly precocious horse, isn't he? To have come so far in such a short space of time with that giant frame. And that surge from 2 out was super impressive. But I need to broaden this out and ask a question. Put this on the poll, Dave, definitely. Not your fault alone, Billy Nash, but you need to pull some levers in Ireland. Was it a disgrace that this race, perhaps the most significant race of the weekend, went off at 11:30 a.m.? Put it on the poll, Dave. Disgrace or not?
The only reason I can think for that, GC, is low sun issues. They have moved a number of chases to earlier in the cards in Ireland to deal with low sun. And personally, I'd rather see a race run at 11:30 in the morning than jumping 4 fences, you know.
Billy,
I withdraw my last statement.
Billy, can I ask you 2 questions? Can I ask
Take it
you
off
2
the poll.
questions?
Yeah, sure.
One, Billy, I'm sensing over here discontentment from a number of trainers about the lack of novice options in Ireland, particularly at Christmas with the 2-mile novice chase. Could Britain be the beneficiary of that, with some Irish contenders coming over Christmas? And 2, if in a fantasy 2-mile novice chase, it was just after Christmas to allow Majborough time to recover, would you want to be with Majborough or Ballyburn?
Good questions, Ed. The first question, I think you're absolutely right. There is a lot of discontent about the fact that the 2-mile Grade 1 novice chase has gone off the St. Stephen's Day card at Leopardstown. For what reason, I'm not entirely sure. Okay, the fields were small in recent years, but it has a really rich history. And you can see with the way trainers are moaning about it this year, it would have been supported again this year. So I'm surprised it's gone, and it is a significant option that is no longer available to them. Will 1 or 2 horses go to England? I would say almost inevitably, because they have to find options for them. And as DJ mentioned, Willie in particular is fairly well stacked in this division, so I'd be surprised if he didn't send at least 1 across the pond. Question 2, right now, if you gave me the choice between Majborough and Ballyburn, there's very little between them, but I think I'd still come down on the side of Ballyburn. I was hugely taken with him the first day. Majborough's a good horse, but I think Ballyburn is a bit special.
Billy, that's a massive talent for understatement. Willie is fairly well stacked. Have a look at this list. Ballyburn, Majborough, Empire Pass, Atlantique, Arcade Bourbon, Dancing City, Lecky Watson, Reading Tommy Wrong, Blizzard of Oz. I've almost certainly missed 1 or 2, but the number of potential Grade 1 winning novice chasers in that yard is well into double figures already.
Absolutely, he's
and I just think someone like the Wayward Lad could have an interesting contender or 2 in it. Let's put it that way.
Led to believe it is between the Wayward Lad and Limerick, isn't it, for Ballyburn? They've got 2 options, and Willie favours, timing-wise, that the Wayward Lad gives you longer into the DRF than the Limerick race would. So it could be interesting to see what heads over. Billy, just a quick line before we move on. Slade Steel beaten again over fences by Lecky Watson, who's talented, but where do you think they're going to end up with Slade Steel?
Very interesting question too, because I was thinking about this. Now, first off, Lecky Watson is a horse I have a bit of a soft spot for, Dave. He has hurt my pocket on a few occasions, but I do think this fella has been crying out for fences. And although he's not entirely straightforward, as you could see the last day, he did wander into a couple of fences. He had a look at the gate on the first circuit going out, going past the stands. But I think there's loads of talent there. He mightn't be a Grade 1 chaser, but there's definitely a big race to be won with him over fences. It could be a valuable handicap next year, but he's certainly one to keep in your notebooks. Slade Steel, on the other hand, first of all, it was great to see Rachel Blackmore back, her first stride back for, I think, 3 months out. Looked like she had never been away, to be honest. But Slade Steel, he jumped better than he had jumped on his chasing debut, but he was still very much on the careful side. I thought he didn't make any bad mistakes or anything, but wasn't really having a cut at his fences. And having looked at that, I don't think it was the plan at the beginning of the season, but I wouldn't be surprised now if they pivot towards the novice handicap chase at Cheltenham with him. You know, gives him an opportunity to get another couple of runs maybe into him for experience purposes. Now, whether he'd actually, I'm not sure if that race has a ceiling. When it was run as a novice handicap chase in the past, it was a 0 to 145. I don't know if that's going to be the case again this year. Henry de Bromhead won the last edition of it with Absolute Tar, who won off a rating of 143. As things stand, Slade Steel would probably, if given a handicap mark now, would be handicapped in his hurdles form, which would put him slightly above that bracket. But if they could get another couple of runs into him, I think he'd be pretty much bang on that level if they keep him to, you know, maiden company and whatever. So I could see them going down that route with him, but either way, I think he does need a bit more experience over fences. The other option is to try and up in trip, go 3 miles with him. On pedigree, it shouldn't be an issue. So they have options, and I wouldn't write him off just yet, you know.
Right, we're getting towards the end of 2024. We'll be back on Monday with a Christmas racing preview. Before I'm going to ask the panellists just for their moment of the year, 2024. DJ, what was your favourite racing moment of 2024?
Yeah, I was having to really stretch the brain and go back because it seems so long ago. But and being in jumps mode, I'm sure plenty of people want me to shut up about it. But it's City of Troy, I think, in the Derby, and Aidan O'Brien, you know, just being able to pull off that rabbit out of the hat again, 2 years on the bounce, having disappointed so badly in the Guineas. And not just that, but I mean, a race like the Derby will always have significance throughout the season because of obviously the prestige surround it. But the race doesn't always stack up in the way that you would like it to. But I think this year it did. It was run at a relentless gallop, and just the way that it unfolded, it was a great story to watch it as it was unfolding. You know, he had Ambiente Friendly, who had you know, created quite a lot of pre-race headlines himself in terms of the Rab Havlin, Callum Shepherd issue, and I'm sure for 2 or 3 strides, Rab would have thought, I'm going to actually win the Derby, you know, the way that he came through, and then he would have glanced to his inside and seen Ryan Moore absolutely motoring past. And just on that day, City of Troy, maybe he didn't go on and do quite as much as what I would have hoped based on what he did as a 2-year-old, but in terms of what he did in the Derby and the way that he did it, I just thought it was a great occasion and a great race, and that was my moment of 2024.
Happy day for DJ. GC, what got your vote?
Yeah, this has been a really hard year for many people in racing. I think my moment of the year, Cheltenham scenes at Royal Ascot, Crystal Black, Duke of Edinburgh handicap, Colin Keane riding for his old man, Ger, a high 70s Ger. You can't get much better than that unless it's a bargain buy owned by a syndicate of friends, wear a pink ribbon syndicate, who are commemorating a friend they lost, Breeder Miley. And you talk about the joy that racing can give. That's unusual at Royal Ascot, given all the powerhouse stables who are in attendance there. So to see that combination of events, Colin Keane said he'd never taken more joy or pleasure from riding a winner than doing that for his old man at Royal Ascot. And then the scenes with the singing, celebrating connections. I thought that was a brilliant moment among many in what was a really memorable Royal Ascot. And Crystal Black, by the way, he was one of the big misses in the second half of the season because he thrashed the Euphrates in a Group 3 at Leopardstown next time. And he looked all set for a big Melbourne Cup bid, but hopefully that can wait until next year. But Crystal Black, Duke of Edinburgh, Royal Ascot for me.
GC, Ed, what
I can't believe that. I cannot believe that.
No, is it the same one?
I cannot believe that. And, well, I played my hand. I was asked last time we were in Ascot to say I'm not just making this up, Audie, because I was asked, was it Andy who asked me for my moment of the year? And I said, very similar to what GC said there.
Well, that's fair enough. I mean, that just shows what special moment it was.
It was. Just to add to it, and GC's talked about that race beautifully, it was the most amazing day to present. And actually this weekend is Alistair Warwick's final day as chief executive at Ascot. And he's done a brilliant job, you know, getting Ascot out of COVID with that test day and all the other things he's done since. And he's made Ascot for everyone. And that day summed it up. It had something for everybody, every budget, every interest in racing. The Keane story was wonderful. Fairy Godmother for racing fans was spectacular. And Luke Harvey dancing in the Windsor enclosure was utterly bizarre. It was just a magic day of sport.
Now, Billy, it's been another difficult year for Irish trainers at home and abroad. Have you managed to find a highlight somewhere in among the gruel that you've got to dig through?
I feel like a contestant on Countdown here, Dave Ord. I'm going to pass over my answer as well, which is exactly the same as GC's and Chamberlain's.
Not a clear winner, then.
We really should have pre-production meetings again, you know. But yeah, it would have been Crystal Black. At the moment of the year, I think it was hard to top that. For an equine performance, I would give it to I Am Maximus in the Grand National. I thought he was sensational on the day. I don't remember a Grand National being won as easily as that. But as the lads have said, the moment of the year for me was definitely Crystal Black at Ascot.
They put it on the poll. Should we put our heads together before this podcast to stop embarrassments like this one?
Or can Ord make it 4 out of 5? What would Ord go for?
Yeah,
mine was Dan Skelton straight after the Ryanair chase when the guard was down, and he was asked, "Where does this rank, Dan? Where does Protectorat winning this rank for you?" Right at the effing top. Live on TV. It was absolutely brilliant. It was like a rare, very good hour for the British at Cheltenham in recent years. It was just summed up to perfection. He later apologised for the strong language, but there was no need. It was a tremendous moment. With a clear win, if we had a trophy to hand out, we know where the moment of the year trophy would be heading. I'll see if there's one within budget at our next pre-production meeting. I've also asked Ed, and you can go first with this one, the star for 2025, also to follow for 2025. What are you looking forward to seeing? It can be from either code, for any reason. Something you're looking forward to in 2025.
Oh, I'd love Mr. Van Gogh to win at Chepstow on the 28th.
That's
2024. But I think I've got to go for Sir Gino Wardy, wherever he goes, be it fences, hurdles, hopefully fences, because I love the horse and I love what the Donnellys are doing for my charity Wellchild. So hopefully he can win lots of money for them. And you might have seen it this week, what Wellchild does. It's been plenty of coverage for it. And to help, for a horse like that, to help kids be looked after at home would be pretty spectacular in my book.
Fantastic gesture, and best of luck to Gino for 2025. Again, Ed misunderstood the question, DJ. I'll come to you. Looking forward to in 2025. The Welsh Nationals off the thing.
Normally gets rearranged for early in the year.
There's every chance. There's every chance. Sorry. DJ, give us a horse you're looking forward to in 2025.
Yeah, he's unlikely to be on too many people's radar at the moment, but there's a horse called Bona Fortuna who...
Oh, I've gone for that one.
He'll be a 4-year-old next year, and he's a Mick Appleby sprinting project. He picked him up at the 2-year-old sales last year for 30,000, having been a 180 grand yearling. He won his first 2 starts for Mick Appleby, but it's actually his defeat that makes him most interested. It was a really strong 3-year-old handicap at Newbury that's thrown up plenty of winners and good horses that were well handicapped along the way. And Bona Fortuna shaped much better than the result that day. He finished only 5th, but it was a race that was run at a strong gallop that suited those that were held up, and he was one of those that was up with the pace throughout. That was his first start at 7 furlongs, and I just don't think he quite saw it out either. So I think coming back to 6 furlongs will really suit. He's only got a BHA mark of 78, so there's quite a lot of scope for him to improve through the ranks next year. So Bona Fortuna is a sprint handicapper to follow, I think, for Mick Appleby in 2025.
So you've been desperately trying to find a substitute, GC. Have you found one for a horse to follow?
That's textbook DJ. That's sensational.
Nice offer.
I have got one. I think among the potential stars, and I think Billy feels the same, I think Ballyburn is the ace of aces among that Mullins crop. And I think by the end of the season, we'll be talking about something really special. But in terms of a quiet one to follow, some people say, Cunningham, you can't tip your hat. Well, this horse is owned by the Tip Your Hat syndicate. Trilby, you'll know the horse, Sam England. She paid $2,000 for him from the Bowie stable. I think he ran 18 times last season, but he kept getting better in sprint handicaps. He's not completely exposed at 5 furlongs. I think he's such a high cruiser. That's his trip. So I would think keep an eye on him until he wins a nice handicap, and hopefully that won't be too long, over 5 furlongs. So Trilby in sprint handicaps in the spring or early summer.
Stuff. Yeah, I don't think you're going to have a sprint handicapper for us. I'm just guessing, given the Irish strength in that division, which is a major problem and continues to be. What have you got for us to follow in 2025, Billy?
We're a coming force in the sprints, Dave. Give us time. At the risk of being a real recency bias here. One horse to follow that really grabbed me at the weekend, the bumper winner at Fairyhouse, Future Prospect, trained by Willie Mullins, 4-year-old filly. Look, I think it's tipping a one to follow for 2025 that I hadn't heard of this time last week is, it's probably a new one, but hugely impressed by her, I must admit. It was a 4-year-old filly's bumper. The couple that had run looked pretty solid, including the Gordon Elliott trained Swing Davis, who'd been third in a listed bumper on her first start. Future Prospect had won a point to point. She's by order of St. George. She's owned in partnership by Bronson Racing and Mrs. Sue Magner. She looked really special to me. She pulled Patrick's arms out. She nearly ran off the track with him. Looked like she was going to get swallowed up in the straight and then sprinted clear to win by about 10 lengths. She's 33 to 1 to 14s for the champion bumper. I'm sure Willie will bring out a whole host of very nice bumper horses over Christmas, but 14 to 1 for the Cheltenham bumper wouldn't be a bad price, I would think, at this stage of the season. Either way, she's going to win plenty of races, and she's one that I'm looking forward to seeing out again.
Now, GC, you won't be with us Monday for our Christmas preview, so I just want a quick line from you. Potential on that Ladbrokes King George VI chase, altogether different race than it looked like being 3 weeks ago. We've got Grey Dawning in there. We've got Spillane's Tower being supplemented. It's bubbling
and the
away,
French,
really
and
nice.
the French,
and a French supplementary as well. It's not the race we were expecting. And what's your angle into it at this early stage?
Well, it's fascinating because if you just have a quick look at the race, you'll see, I think, 8, 9, maybe even 10 horses who are all very closely matched, mid 160s, 165, 166, 167. One of them, maybe more than one, is going to nudge through that 170 barrier to win the race. And from a pure excitement and spectacle perspective, Grey Dawning is the one. Now, he's not a one-man or a Teton Mill or a Desert Orchid yet, but he has that sort of colour and swagger about him. And I thought his Betfair Chase run was tremendous. He did have a hard race, but the way he jumped and travelled suggests he's a genuine Grade 1 horse. And from Ed's point of view, from a TV point of view, from a broadcast point of view, the potential sight of that horse just letting fly down the far side at Kempton and coming there travelling strongly is one that could really make the glass a bit more than half full over Christmas, I think.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Fascinating, King George, and so much more to look forward to. We get the entries from Ireland today, Wednesday, come through for the 26th and 27th. They'll be stacked with the big names, and on Friday we'll get the 6-day entries for Boxing Day in the UK. We'll be previewing it all on Monday's podcast. But Ed, before then, it's Ascot. It's a very festive Saturday at Ascot. We've got the Howden Long Walk Hurdle. It's as good as it can be with that division at the moment with the domestic horses, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a really good couple of days this order. Families listening, if you get the chance, I actually take mine on Friday just for a day out. And Ascot do it brilliantly well. They really do. And Saturday will be a lot of fun with good racing. It's a division that needs to unearth a real strong rival for Tearpoo. I think it's head and shoulders above the rest at the minute. And strong leader might well be that horse. And he's going the right way. He's jumping better. It's not a bad long walk, this. And the Charles Burns horse, if it runs the one that won at Haydock, will be a very interesting rival. So one of those two you'd like to think might win convincingly and put their hand up as a proper rival to Tearpoo. Elsewhere on the card, it's good racing. You've got Victorino for the unstoppable Deutsch Williams bandwagon that's rolling so well. Fair play to them with their CV. And he was the eye catcher in the Coral Gold Cup. Back going right-handed, he'll take a lot of beating in that handicap chase that he won last year. And then I used to call it the Ladbroke at the end of the day. I mean, it was the hardest race back when I was an odds compiler to price up. The old Ladbroke over in Ireland at Leopardstown. It used to be about 14 to 1 the field when we first priced it up. In those days, that was innovation, pricing that up 5 days in advance. That just didn't happen in those days. And that really tested you. And it's good to see it back in some sort of guise at Ascot at the weekend, the final race over here. And that looks a competitive affair. The Skelton horse, who was so eye-catching in the Great Woods, a fascinating runner there. You just wonder for him, is Saturday the target for that horse, Be Aware? Or do they have another target in mind in March, which will be interesting to see, because the Skelton and Dan Skelton's unstoppable when he targets a 2-mile handicap hurdler.
The average trainers are taking a look at this long walk. I mean, I'm looking for the final decks. I'm sure I can find them in a second. The Wall Park for Gordon Elliott. Gordon said Pertemps fine after he won the Pertemps qualifier at Cheltenham. JP's bought it, and I presume they've looked at the revised handicap mark and decided to test the waters in graded races.
Yeah, look, going back to our point earlier about all the good national hunt horses being owned by a small pool of owners. Well, here's another one, the Wallpark, the JP is after snapping up a horse that's had plenty of racing, but does seem to be getting better for it, and was impressive at Cheltenham the last day. He stays really well. Like you said, he's creeping up the handicap, so I think he's entitled to have a go at a race like this. Certainly on figures, he'll need to improve another 8 or 9 pounds maybe to beat the likes of Strong Leader, but he's only a 6-year-old, so it's possible that he might. Shoot First is another one coming from the handicap route, and Henry de Bromhead's Hidden Valley Lake, if he comes across, would be very interesting. Certainly if the ground was soft at Ascot, I don't know if it's going to be. I think he's particularly effective when there's a good bit of cut in the ground. He's a horse that stays well. I'm surprised they haven't gone back chasing with him, because he looks every inch a chaser and didn't run too badly on his only try over fences. But we know he stays, and like I said, if the ground is very soft, I think he could go well. So they're interesting contenders. At the moment on ratings, Strong Leader is the one to beat. So it'll be, again, fascinating race, I think.
This is why we should have a pre-production meeting. It's becoming glaringly obvious. Anybody else got anything for the weekend before I wrap up this podcast?
We got your horse to follow already, did we, for 2025?
What's that, sorry?
Did we get your horse to follow for 2025?
On a trade.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's a horse called Musical Touch, who will be racing for a new racing club coming to Sporting Life very soon. Free to Sporting Life Plus members. I've given away too much, haven't I, DJ? I've given away too much. But Musical Touch will be one of our horses. Sprint handicapper, trained by Richard Fahey. Probably wins 7 or 8, including the Wokingham. He's rated time form 86, but he's going to be a fun sprint handicapper for the year ahead.
I'm looking forward to seeing Iroko at Ascot at the weekend. I think he's not a top notcher, but I think he's a good horse. I think he probably should have won when he just got beaten by Trelawney in that good race at Haydock first time. I thought he was handled relatively gently first time out, but he should take a lot of beating at Ascot this weekend. But you mentioned, giving things away. Can you give anything away about a Christmas quiz on sportinglife.com?
Give a quiz. It will be live on Monday, JC. And all I will say is answers this year have been verified. I've got a team of crack researchers currently Googling the hell out of the 20 questions.
Is it true that you've had complaints about the veracity of 1 or 2 of those questions on Christmas morning in the past?
We have received 300 emails last Christmas morning. To be fair, 2 of the 20 questions had incorrect answers. That's all I'm saying. Oh. But if you want to get off to a flying start Googling the Go Racing in Yorkshire annual awards. That's all I'm saying. If you start finding out who the award winners were there, then...
I don't know what it's like around you. In Hampshire here, people talk about Christmas and the joys of Christmas, carol services, meals with the family, and the Sporting Life quiz all go hand in hand.
It's that joy of not knowing if your answer's correct or not when you look at the answers. That's what you need. People on their toes. It's good for traffic. People shoot that can't be right. And so they were proved right twice in 2023, but not this year. The Scoop, as we speak, is verifying all of the answers. Well,
just before we wrap up, Dave, I was just saying we ought to set up the Silver Cup handicap, which is the 3-mile handicap at Ascot on Saturday, because this Victorino is something of a key horse, isn't he? Obviously, Venetia been making hay with her handicap chasers this season, won the big race at Cheltenham last week, and Victorino, he rather fluffed his lines, didn't he, in the big race at Newbury. Wasn't going anywhere for a long while and then absolutely flew home. And that's sort of going to be the interesting key to him, because he got behind in the Ultima and hated that. But whether returning to Ascot is going to really perk him up or not, his real good record at the track, won this race last year. So I think he's already favourite, and you sort of got to take the view on whether returning to Ascot is going to see him at his absolute peak again, or whether he might be a little bit vulnerable if this tendency to get behind and make mistakes early on, whether that's just a thing going left-handed and on an undulating track like Cheltenham, or whether it might be an issue. So whichever way you play it, it makes the race a really interesting puzzle, I think.
Fascinating race, and really, really good day's racing. And Ed, with Venetia, when she's on this sort of roll, she confirmed that Cheltenham, L'Empresse and Royal Pagal on target for the King George. You just, I know you pulled a face there, sorry, but it's like you do wonder. Nothing's impossible.
No, and she's just a brilliant trainer, isn't she? She really is. And yeah, I'd be surprised if we saw Royal Pagaille. It sounds like Long Press is a definite possibility. We know how well he goes fresh. So I would think we'd probably see one of the two, but I don't know. I'm guessing because she plays her cards very close to her chest. And I just think Victorino, with the way Charlie Deutsch is riding, back going right-handed at Ascot where he goes so well, is going to take an awful lot of stopping in that. And her CV this season and numbers are extraordinary. I rattled off her big race wins after Gemma won that big race. And it's amazing, really. And he was going away at the end. I wonder if it had been closer, that's a whole other story, if they might have had a look at that jump 2 out, which was obviously important. But Harry Skelton, as he came in, was shaking his head. He just said, those Venetia Williams horses are so hard to get past at the moment. And he was right.
Can I ask Billy a quick question? And it's all up in the air. King George, Billy, Spillans Tower, Corbett's Cross, one, both, or neither? What do you think?
To Jane Mangan talking at Naas yesterday, or Monday indeed, she was on with Kevin O'Ryan, and she seems fairly certain that Spillans Tower is going to go there. That's definitely the plan at the moment. It just depends on whether they get enough rain. We had buckets of it yesterday. I don't know whether they got much at Kempton, but hopefully there will be enough. And it looks like Spillans Tower is on track for there. I don't know about Corbett's Cross, but surely one of them will run. And if I had to put money on it at the moment, it would be Spillans Tower.
I tell you what, Billy, I've put my hand up for the Willie Mullins column this week. He's only got 3 entries, which I think speaks volumes for the Irish. I think basically the shutters have come down in Ireland nearly now, haven't they, for Christmas? Because once you get running, there's plenty coming up. But it's a quiet weekend with just the one meeting.
Yeah, just the one meeting at Thurles. That's par for the course over here. The weekend before Christmas is always quiet. So a kind of what is probably best described as an industry day at Thurles on Saturday, blank day on Sunday, and then of course it all kicks off on Stephen's Day. So yeah, that'll be fairly typical for Willie, but that doesn't mean that one of his 3 horses won't go in and win, because he's absolutely flying at the moment.
Along nice. And just finally, Ed, GC's at Ludlow today for Racing TV. At Ludlow, before Christmas, it was also seen David Nicholson used to lay one out for the lads and they'd get their Christmas money with it. Alan King started doing the same early on in his career. Has King given you the one, Ed, for Ludlow today? Did Alan speak to you at Cheltenham and tip you the wink for what's the Ludlow winner for him today?
No.
There you go. Tried my best, but we will find out. I'm just hoping peace and goodwill breaks out in the great game in 2025. One of my many wishes for the year ahead. Thanks to GC, thanks to DJ, Billy and Ed. We'll be back on Monday with our preview, where we have the final decks for Kempton and all that cracking racing at Leopardstown.
This is Sporting Life.